Hello, fellow SPED teachers. I am Karina Tricarico, and I am responding to the conversations we've had together on Facebook regarding how I collect data using Google Forms and those requests of how I do that. So here you go. I'm going to share screen so I can show stuff to you. For context, I am a high school teacher and I teach moderately impacted autistic kids, most of whom are working towards a standard diploma, a few of who are working towards a modified diploma. They spend 2 periods with me and 6 periods in the general education setting. So we're working on social skills, communication, social communication, self-regulation, executive function skills like organization. So those are the kinds of things that you're going to see in the samples here. So on the screen, I have my Google Drive. I created a sample folder for myself in here, just to go backwards in my drive a little bit. So I have a student surveys folder. Within that folder, I'll have Q1, Q2, Q3, so on, before and after breaks. Once I have set up the Google form, which it is a lot to set up the initial Google form to translate the goals or the parts of the goals that I want to ask teachers about into the Google form. But once I've done that, now I can just make copies of those and make them into the new folder. So I will set up a new folder in here for each. So Q1 for this year, etc., a Q2, Q3, Q4. So in my sample folder, which I created so that I could preserve confidentiality and copy over, remove student names, etc., I have 3 surveys sampled in here, and then I have a Google Doc where I put more information. I'll show you that. Okay, so sample 1 is right here. Let's see. So here's a Google form. Let me back up a little bit, actually. If I wanted to make a new Google form, once I'm in this folder where I want to make it, hit new, hit Google form. It's going to start a new Google form for me, and I can start copy and pasting from the IEP or from maybe a document that I've created. I always do multiple choice because my goal is to make these as easy for the teachers as possible. 1 or 2 minutes. If it's super easy, it's super short. I will get teachers to be doing it for me consistently, and I will get good, consistent data collection. So the less wordy, the better, which is hard for me. Okay, so sample 1, I have a self-regulation goal here that I put in with the multiple choice options. How often does the student cope with disagreements, cues, or frustrations in proportionate and typical ways? So I put a versus, so I know, so the teacher knows what they're not looking for. We don't want to see high emotion, foul language, argument, disruption. For another student, I don't want to see them leaving the room, or I might define that as shutting down, whatever. The categories are important. I try to use, for my multiple choice categories, always, mostly, sometimes, and rarely. And then I do a quick definition most of the time, but not always. I put them in that order when the always is what I'm looking for. I put them in reverse order when the rarely is what I'm looking for. In other words, the first multiple choice option is my target, the goal that we're working towards, that thing that we want to see. The second is I'm almost there. The third is my 50-50. The fourth is, oh, we have a lot of work to do in this area. We rarely see it, or we always see the problem behavior. The reason why I do it in that order is because then the teachers get used to seeing this is the best, this is second best, this is 50-50, this is what we don't want to see. When the order is the same, the questions are consistent from one question to the next, it makes it easy for you, it makes it easy for the students when they look at it, and I'll show you that, and it makes it easy for the teachers. I do sometimes add definitions to those categories. It's not usually 100% of the time, right? Usually it's as comparable to peers. So like this one is exchanging in reciprocal academic or casual conversation with multiple balanced exchanges following the rules of turn taking versus interrupting, dominating, or only talking about what I want to talk about. So always, habitually, I blend in. Often there's only occasional problems. Sometimes, like, I regularly need help. So you can see those definitions in there. I always put an optional long answer text at the end so the teachers can give me more input if they want. It's only optional. All right. Sample 2. I'm going to show you because this is my side of it, what I see. The first sample is what the teachers see. As you can see, now I can see this add option or add other. Don't do that, because then the teachers can choose that if they feel like these 4 categories don't quite fit, they'll choose that. And then half the teachers do. And now you've got 6 pieces of data and 6 percentages instead of just the 4 that you wanted. And the problem with that is a lot of times the 5th and the 6th fit into one of those other categories. And so then you have to do the math. So just give them those 4 categories, less if you can. If your goal is conducive to fewer categories, do it that way. This one I'm also showing you because it has some academic goals for a student who's working towards a modified diploma. This goes in combination with that iReady diagnostic or an informal reading inventory or a 1-minute math timing, whatever, another more formal way to take data. I like to combine what is the teacher seeing in the classroom, what is the hard data when I sit down and give the kid a worksheet. I do use ereadingworksheets.com a lot because, especially for reading, and sometimes for writing, because they have targeted worksheets that are like just on character motivation, just on connotative language, just on figurative language, just on inference. And I can give a quick survey on inference if that's what the student's goal is. Anyway, that's an aside. So you can see here, I can't do always, often, sometimes rarely, but I've narrowed it down to 3 categories. This reading goal for this student, for example, is vocabulary and comprehension. Are they able to summarize their reading and state the main idea of informational text? So the teacher has 3 choices. I regularly see that they can understand it. Sometimes I realize they didn't gain the knowledge from the reading they wanted. Often I see they didn't gain the knowledge. I combine that with the formal. So the shorter, the less wordy, the fewer options this is, the easier it is on teachers. The easier it is on teachers, the more likely your teachers are to actually do it. This 5th one was a math goal that a student came in with all of these. And so I turned it into a checkbox instead. Are you seeing any of these, the student being able to do these independently? So sometimes you'll have a teacher who will not want to do the survey. They think it's going to be 5 or 10 minutes. And so I will find a good time to visit them, show up with my computer open to the survey open and say, hey, let's just do this together really quick. I'll ask the questions, ask the answers. We do it. I try to be super efficient so that then I can go, see, 1-minute survey. Those are super fast. Then they see, oh, actually, that would have taken less time if I'd done it on my own instead of having her show up. And they get an opportunity to say to the teacher, hey, so I'm required to send these percentages home on progress reports that are legally required every single time we do report cards. A lot of times teachers don't realize that we have to send this data home. I get the opportunity to say, hey, I could come and observe, or I could send my one instructional assistant that's shared among 15 students to observe and take the data. But I'm a little concerned the data would change when the student knows that we're there observing them. And I'd really rather get your expert opinion, your observations of what's happening in class. Teachers like that too. And then I show them, as I'm showing you, here's the responses. The students are going to see these percentages, and I'm going to sit with the student and go over these percentages with them. They see your email here that you've answered, and I can look at the individual data if I need to, but then I use this to coach them. So like if this student is constantly blurting, constantly interrupting, doesn't raise his hand, etc., when I get this data, and I go over it with the student, that helps the student improve that. So it's kind of a what's in it for you to the teachers that will get the teachers to do it for you more easily. So I was at the questions. You probably know how to set up these questions. I have some examples for you. You just hit the plus here. It will add a question for you. You can choose whether you want to be multiple choice, check boxes, etc. You can move it around, go to a different spot, renumber it, all those good things. Send it out to your teachers. Then you get it back and you have this responses that we just took a peek at. Now, you just see my email over and over because I had to answer these for confidentiality reasons, create a fake one without student names. Typically, when you open this up, it'll be all the teachers' emails. This is really handy when you have a student who says, I always raise my hand in other classes, and even when I don't, the teachers don't have a problem with it. Or I look just like all the gen ed students. I shouldn't be in this special program. And then I can come to here, which we meet every quarter, at least once a quarter, usually a few times through a quarter. We look at this quarter's data and the previous quarter's data so that we can compare and look at growth over time, and we can go rah-rah on the things that are doing well and problem solve and do some coaching and some planning for improving some other things. But then I can point out, here's your math teacher, here's your lit teacher, here's your science teacher, etc. So the data is not coming from me, the data is coming from your gen ed teachers. Then we can look at the individual results. Now, here's the percentages, obviously, that I'm putting into the progress notes, and I'll show you that and how I word that. But the student gets to see this. Now, the reason why I have the thing I want most first, the thing I want second most second, is because Google is consistent with the colors. Oh, the first option that you give is always blue. The second option that you put in your multiple choice is always red. Third option is always yellow, and so on. So then I can start getting the habit of, let's look for the blue. We want blue and red. Those are the things we're looking for. Now I might, depending on what it is, like in this case, I've never seen an overreaction, or I've only seen a few incidents of an overreaction. Those are both good. I might combine those together and say, 80% of the time, the student always or often is coping with frustrations, which at that point, obviously, we're going to talk about changing this goal or dropping the goal. Maybe he's met criteria for the goal. However, we do have this sometimes. Where is that happening? So the other part of this is I can look at patterns. The student always does great in math class, never does well in science class, or whatever the case is. So when I look at these percentages with the students and we make some plans, we look at it over time, that helps my coaching. If they say, well, which teacher said rarely? Which teacher says I rarely use hand signals? Where's that happening? I don't believe it. I can go to individual and it will show that individual teacher's email. And I can scroll down and go, oh, here, it's your lit teacher or whatever teacher who says that you often interrupt, talk over, engage, etc. But then when we go look at, say, your math teacher's responses, oops, it didn't click through, did it? Okay. Oh, it's going backwards. Okay. It says that you often, in your other class, you often raise your hand, signal, wait your turn to talk. So we talk about the differences between those two classes. We take the successes from the one class, let's apply those successes to the other class. And that's a really good way to preserve dignity and build on success. It's also a good way for me to look at the data from several quarters and say, he's meeting all these objectives in these two settings. He's not meeting any objectives in these settings. So maybe we need to rewrite the goal for non-preferred topics, right? So this is a really good piece of data that shows that in a preferred setting with preferred topics, I can do this thing in a non-preferred setting or in a high sensory impact setting or whatever. We need to write the goal to address those needs. Okay. The third sample, here's the questions. This is for a little bit different student. This is the student that shuts down a lot. The reason why I wanted to show you this one is question 2, how often does the student offer input in whole class discussions? And question 3, how often does the student verbally participate in partner small group? Those are two different things, whole group and small group, but they're together in the same IEP goal. So in this case, I took 2 objectives. I made a question for each objective. I usually try to avoid that because again, I'm trying to keep it really, really short, but sometimes you just have to do it that way. I try to never have a survey with more than 5 or 6 questions, by the way. As you can see, I couldn't use the always, always, sometimes, often, rarely, etc. Here, for the whole class, it made more sense. 1 or more inputs per period. I'm always seeing an input. About 1 input per period, maybe once or twice a week, or only when called on. So the categories were a little bit different on these. So you have to use your judgment as to what makes sense. Okay. So I am not going to be able to share these Google Forms with you because as soon as I do, the only way to do that is to add collaborators who then become editors. And that wouldn't make sense because if people started messing with it, it wouldn't make sense for other people. So what I did is I took a bunch of these goals and I put them into a document that I can easily share. So this document has 7 goals and each goal has 3 parts. Part 1 is the actual goal and objectives itself. So you can see what that goal looks like. I'm trying really hard to write my goals so they're conducive to a Google Forms. Part 2 is how did that goal translate into a Google form in the question and the categories? So this first example is the student will use a planner to record work that needs to be completed outside of class with specific assignment descriptor and name, the due date, and including checkpoints for larger ongoing checked projects, resulting in turning in 85% of classroom assignments on time and fully completed. So all that first part, the planner check and everything, I'm doing that on my own form, paper form during planner check time, during academic coaching. The teachers aren't a part of that. The only part that the teachers are a part of is, are 85% of those classroom assignments being turned in on time? So the question on the Google form is just that, about how often does the student complete assigned tasks fully complete and accurately done? And it should say on time because that's what the goal says. Always, often, sometimes, rarely, and never. This one has a 5th category because never should be a category for a specific goal like this. So I'm showing this example so you can see that some of the objectives are data that I collect in class with the students. Some of the objectives are the ones the teachers will provide input on. Also wanted you to see that every once in a while I do need that always and never 5 categories instead. Okay, the third part of this is, what does that look like in progress notes? Teacher survey results are always has work in on time fully completed in 33% of classes, often 50%, sometimes 50%. I would add in the planner check data. Students passing X percentage of planner checks. For objective 1, I would be breaking these down by objectives, but I just included the part that addresses the Google Forms so you can see how I did the Google Forms part. You didn't need to see the rest of it. What might be a better way is this one. Example 2 is a perspective taking goal. Student accurately assesses expected behaviors for the setting and matches his to what's expected. So he's considering context. The response chain is something that we work on class. If I do this, then people are going to react this way. If people react this way, they're going to treat me this way, etc. The only part of these objectives that the teachers are looking at is how often does his behavior match those of the setting. So you can see how that big, long goal and objectives up there translated into just how often does the student assess accurately what's expected and appropriate and then match to that. And this is your typical 4 always. He blends in, mostly blends in, half the time he blends in. He's looking really unexpected an awful lot of the time. For the progress notes, I did include the categories here. With categories of always, often, sometimes, rarely, teacher survey data is that the student accurately assesses expectations for the setting and makes positive or matching choices. often half the time, and sometimes half the time. So now the parents know that there isn't any setting at school where they always or habitually blend in and choose those behaviors, but there isn't a setting in which they rarely do. So that's good for them to know. So there's 7 goals in here in this document that I'm going to share. Each shows what the IEP goal and objectives looks like, which part of that I sent out in the teacher survey because it was appropriate to collect that data from the classroom rather than from my own in-program data collection, and then what that section of it looked like on the IEP progress notes. I know a lot of us will do like, here's the data for objective 1, here's the data for objective 2, here's the data for objective 3. I just included the objectives that the teachers are a part of. At the end of this document is some scripts I use when sending the form to the teachers. So if I go back to sample 1, and I'm going to send this to the teachers, it's going to come up like this. I could put it as a link in an email, but your organization should have the emails loaded. So as soon as I start typing a teacher's name and the 2, it will appear. It defaults to whatever you titled it. Q4 student IEP goals data collection. It's not really eye-catching for a teacher. There also defaults to this message. I've invited you to fill out a form. What I do is I take this script. So I might copy the 1-minute 3-question multiple choice survey. Usually it's 5 questions, but so I copy that and come over here and put that in the subject line. So the teacher sees that and goes, okay, I've got 1 minute, I can do that. And then because I want the teacher to know a little bit more, my message is going to be this. It's a super fast multiple choice survey. I have to send them home with report cards. I use them in one-on-one coaching meetings. Seeing the data coming from you makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for your time. That kind of message with it, with the survey coming into their email, is getting a better response for me. I do not include the form in the email because it doesn't always submit right, and I don't always get the results correctly. It's just weird. I don't know why. So we'll cancel this since I'm not actually sending it to anybody. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a quick how to translate the appropriate portions of your IEP goals into a teacher survey so that you're getting some nice percentages to go over with students and put in those progress notes. Remember, just make a copy of this baby for the next quarter. And you have nice, fresh data. So, okay, I think that is it. All right. Well, hopefully that was helpful. I encourage you to delve deeper into Google Forms. There's a lot of really cool stuff, but honestly, I've been doing this for several years and I've never needed anything more than this simple multiple choice. So hope it makes your data collection easier and makes the figuring out the percentages easier and helps you meet with your students to look at their data if they're old enough to be going over that. So happy rest of the summer and have a great school year this year. Bye.